No, we will check out the Xbox One.
It may seem a bit harsh to blame all of Xbox's failures on
Thank
one
you,
man a full decade after he left Xbox. When you look at Xbox's current state and the fact that their boss has said they're in third place, Don Matrick's unfortunate influence and terrible decisions can...
See, you can't blame everything on this one guy. However, this was the beginning of the end, right? This was the beginning of the end of Xbox as a brand. This is kind of why Sony's also struggling from the same thing. This is why Sony is pulling out of releasing their games on PC, because nobody is buying a PlayStation, right? Why, if you can play all of the PlayStation games, a year later on PC, unless it is some major title, like a console seller. And the problem with console sellers now is the console is so expensive, right? In the days of the PS2, right? How much was the PS2 at retail? PS2 retail price. Or the GameCube is another example. The GameCube was incredibly cheap, and the games were more expensive. The PS2 launched at $2.99 Australian. GameCube retail. $2.99 American, sorry. GameCube was $1.99 and then later reduced to $1.50. And then later reduced to $99, right? You can justify a console seller at, double the price of the console. But at what is a PS5 retail price right now? What are we looking at? $550 in America. If you're buying a console for a game, that's a real fucking hard sell now. So Sony is banking on the fact that they can have a plethora of games that are... the same reason why Nintendo doesn't release the games on anything else. Because Nintendo knows that they can sell consoles with their games. The problem is Nintendo isn't Sony, and Nintendo has IPs that people care about. Sony has IPs people care about, and they're all fucking dead or on the PS3. If Sony wanted to make money, right... Why? There's so many IP they could revive and just choose not to. Sly Cooper. Jak and Daxter. We got a new Crash Bandicoot. We never got a new Spyro game. Why not?
Still be felt even a decade after he left Xbox, largely due to mistakes that were made towards the back end of the Xbox 360 era
Little Big Planet.
and the abysmal unveiling of the follow-up console, the Xbox One. The brand has been chasing after Sony ever since, and even now, Xbox is still struggling.
Wait, there was a Spyro live service game? What the fuck? Spyro live service. What? Where the fuck did this come out? Are you saying that we could get one? No, I was saying they would do that. Oh, okay, yeah. Right. Don't even get it.
It doesn't help that Don Matrick followed Xbox's best boss. Peter Moore led Xbox from 2003 until he left for...
The Xbox 360 was such a massive success, right? People forget, the PS3 sold well, right? People think the PS3 didn't sell well. Let me see. Console sales. It sold well, but it more sold well as a Blu-ray player. The problem is... Yeah, so the PS3 actually ended up outselling the 360. But when you think of the gaming console, people of that generation think of the 360. And I think a big part of that is also because of what the 360 had. That was the rise of online multiplayer games. And Call of Duty was just a better experience on the 360 because back then they had the delayed exclusivity for Call of Duty. They had Halo. They had Forza, right? Just Call of Duty and Halo by themselves. Remember, Halo 3 people forget how big Halo 3 was. Let me just find this. Halo 3 max player count. So, around its launch, they had 800,000 daily players. They had... So that was like after launch. Launch day, they had 1 million concurrent on one console in 2007. People forget just how big Halo used to be.
EA Sports in 2007. One thing Peter Moore got right was the 360's first and third-party lineup, as even Grand Theft Auto 4 launched on the Xbox on the same day as
GTA
PlayStation.
4 as well.
Plus new franchises like Mass Effect and BioShock that launched exclusively on the Xbox 360.
Wait, but I did not realize BioShock was originally an exclusive. But yeah, Mass Effect as well. Forgot about that one. Because I didn't play BioShock until a few years later. Oh, it was a year exclusive. Okay. That makes sense.
I always thought that Moore was an unpopular figure given his time at EA.
But now let's part with that old EA Sports saying, get the f*** out of my building.
But fans look back on his tenure fondly. His goal for Xbox was to take the fight to PlayStation, and he understood quite clearly that great exclusives sell console.
Yeah, like, this is... People forget, like, how much it caught up. Towards the end of the PS3 life, it actually did sell quite a lot. But yeah, no, early on, it actually was massive.
Now let's take a look at the Xbox 360 momentum since the other two consoles launched, and outselling PlayStation 3 by nearly 2 to 1.
But this also includes launching a console with the Red Ring of Death, which led to a very generous returns policy. Even with this huge defect, the Xbox 360 was still worth it at the time. Xbox came out swinging in this generation.
Yep.
They launched a full year before their rivals, on top of having great first and third-party games. It had the best online console experience. It pioneered digital distribution for consoles.
The other thing for online, and this was so fucking big. I don't know if it was originally, but very shortly into its life, if you bought a 360, you got a microphone. So it was standard. And then later editions also had the Kinect. Kinect people shouldn't be in lobbies because they were using the mic across the other side of their room. But it was expected that everybody in a 360 online lobby would have a microphone. On the PS3, you had to buy your own microphone. So there'd be like 3 people in a fucking Battlefield lobby that had a mic.
Achievements, and helped to popularize indie games with promotions like Xbox.
Oh yes, also the fucking Xbox. What was the indie thing called?
Live Arcade Wednesdays,
Yeah,
and
Live
later
Arcade,
the
yeah, that
Summer
one.
of Arcade. Peter Moore would be a hard act to follow. Don Mattrick had worked in the industry since the 1980s, which included a 15-year stint as president at EA before taking the job at Xbox. When he joined Xbox in 2007, the Xbox 360 was riding high and outselling the PlayStation 3, but by this point it was still playing second fiddle to the Nintendo Wii.
Yeah.
Xbox and Sony jumped on the motion control bandwagon and both would debut their own devices in 2009. It would seem that...
To be fair, this is not the beginning of motion controls. Sony did try it a few years earlier with the iToy.
Don Mattrick would be blinded by the success of the Wii. It didn't matter that the motion controls were terrible, especially if you tried to make a gameplay mechanic that was even a little bit more complicated than swinging a golf club. Xbox had already made a move at the casual crowd and ripped off Nintendo's Mii's with avatars in 2008. Now you could earn rewards in games to dress your avatar as if it was your own sim. It should come as no surprise that while at EA, Don Mattrick was involved with a series like The Sims. I can't count how many avatars I saw wearing the helmets from Halo ODST. Avatars were also used in some indie games, in game shows, as well as Kinect games. Speaking of Kinect, in 2009 it would make its debut at E3 under the name Project Atoll. Going one step further than the Wii, it was...
The Kinect was... I don't know if he's going to get into this. The Kinect was so much bigger than just the console. The Kinect at the time was a... It was basically the first consumer hardware that was, like, the first hardware of this caliber that was actually cheap. Because before this, if you wanted something like it, you would be paying multiple thousands of dollars.
Just a camera and no controller, as according to Don Matrick, a standard controller is seen as a barrier to entry.
For far too many people, the controller is a barrier separating video game players from everyone else.
Aside from this sounding like he's trying to create a divide between gamers and non-gamers, he seems to be forgetting that the Wii had a controller. There will be a bunch of demos for Kinect games showing happy 2.2 families in their gigantic living rooms, with most of these games being either party, dance, or sports games. I wonder why. Xbox still had a decent first-party lineup at this point, but the third-party offering would start to suffer, as a number of series like BioShock, Lost Planet, and Mass Effect would make their way over to PlayStation eventually. While under Peter Moore, Xbox's goal was to take down PlayStation, but under Don Matrick, Kinect was now Xbox's focus, and Nintendo was the new enemy. Kinect's launch was hailed as a success, as it sold 8 million units in just 2 months, and the Xbox 360 did see an increase in sales. In late 2011, the 360 had its biggest sales week in the console's history. Despite the strong sales, the motion controls sucked.
You ever wonder what the bottom of an Avatar shoe looks like? Well, bam! There it is.
Like the Wii, basic motions were okay, but trying anything that required precision wouldn't work.
Yeah.
This was a device that appealed just to the casual audience. Almost immediately, the core audience rejected Kinect. And looking at the marketing...
Casual audience and scientists. But they weren't doing it for gaming. They were just doing it because the camera was really good at the time.
The lineup of games, it's easy to see why.
It was great for computer vision people.
Xbox would desperately try to make games that appeal to the core audience, but the device just wasn't capable of doing anything that required precision,
same problem
and sometimes
VR
it just had a mind of its own.
So,
In some cases, navigating menus was a complete nightmare.
Enter the world. Race for the best time on each course. Team up in a real...
Also, a number of great studios were put to work to make Kinect exclusives, so again, the first-party lineup would be less appealing. Rare were now making Wii Sport ripoffs and adventure party games for Kinect, while Lionhead, the developers of the Fable games, made a first-person on-rails action RPG that had a fairly mixed reception at best, and unfortunately, this will be the company's last release before closing their doors in 2016. Xbox didn't learn from the mistakes of the Wii, as, like the Wii, the hype soon died off. Motion controls were just another fad, but this one had lasted for the entire generation, and unfortunately for Don Matrick, Xbox had arrived to the party 5 years too late. The PlayStation 3, on the other hand, focused on making great games. They improved the online
experience. Yeah, the PS3 started off weak, and then towards the end of its life, it was a genuinely insane console.
And added a new subscription service, and the first-party offering were Game of the Year contenders. Xbox.
Yeah, you had Last of Us, you had Uncharted, you had God of War 3, I know people should have shit on Last of Us now, but like Last of Us when it came out was a massive deal.
Documentary series called Power On, detailing the rise of Xbox, and episode 4 is entirely devoted to Halo and its sequel. They are very upfront here that without Halo, Xbox wouldn't exist.
Microsoft had that platform-defining title that you had to go out and buy an Xbox if you wanted to play.
Without Halo, we're not here. Halo.
Fucking Phil Spencer!
Which makes it all the more disappointing when you look at the shovelware and broken promises because of Kinect. The first Xbox didn't sell anywhere near the same amount as the PlayStation 2, but a game as good as Halo is a reason to buy the console. But
nothing was going to sell as good as the PS2. The PS2 kept selling. Like, when did Sony stop selling PS2? Yeah, they kept it going till 2013, 6 years into the PS3.
The 360 era, Don Matrick wanted you to buy an Xbox
6-7 years.
because of Kinect.
Haha, funny.
The brand lost sight of what made the Xbox 360 worth buying in favor of trend chasing, and over time this put Sony back in the game. By the end of the generation, the PlayStation 3 overtook the 360, and Xbox would once again end up finishing in third place.
Yep.
For many Xbox fans, the
PS2 was out so long it got Netflix. Okay, I did not know that.
Xbox One and its abysmal reveal will forever be Don Matrick's legacy. If you've ever wondered why the third Xbox console had a very confusing name, it's because this console was meant to be an all-in-one entertainment hub, which included games, movies, TV, and live sport.
I remember the announcement for this. I was watching, like, was it co-optional at that point, or was it still TGS? I think it was still TGS. I remember, like, watching you know, Total Biscuit and Jesse Cox and all talking about this when it was first announced, and it was, I don't know what, like, they really wanted to be, they wanted to compete with the Wii, right? Because the Wii, what the Wii did was it got non-gamers to care about a console. So their goal here was to make this, like, the media center system you bought.
Which means the whole reveal event could basically be summarized with
TV.
Yeah, and there were no fucking games they talked about.
TV. Sports TV.
In the final episode of Power On, this episode about the Xbox One is quite eye-opening, not very surprising, and a little bit depressing.
As each person would get off stage, you know, the execs in the room would ask what the pulse is on social, and it was not good.
This is not going well.
Yep.
This is not going well at all.
To his credit, Don Matrick was interviewed for the series and gave insight into why Xbox took this approach with this console, as he mentioned that more people use the Xbox 360 to watch TV than play games, which would explain the sudden obsession with TV and movies.
It just announced that for the first time, people are using the Xbox more for entertainment, TV, movies, and music, than for playing video games.
Yes, but they didn't buy it for that reason. Oh my god, this is what happens when you see data, but you don't know how to interpret the data. They saw people are watching more TV, watching more movies through the Xbox than playing games, and their logic from that was, oh, that means they care more about TV and movies. Not that we had now entered a stage where digital streaming was becoming more and more popular, and people had an Xbox, and it was a convenient way to watch Netflix and watch... what else was out at the time? Whatever else was out at the time, on your TV, because remember, this was pre-smart TVs, right? Smart TVs still weren't a common thing. So if you wanted to watch Netflix on your TV, there weren't really... maybe Hulu? Yeah. There weren't really that many great... Like, the Apple TV did exist. Google TV did exist. YouTube as well, of course, yeah. But people weren't buying the console for that. They already had the console and were also using it for the additional functionality. They got sidetracked by the additional functionality and forgot why people bought the device to begin with.
It was exciting to think about what a single-purpose, dedicated entertainment console could be.
But this is terrible logic. I bought an Xbox 360 because it had Halo 3 and Grand Theft Auto 4, not because I could watch Netflix. It's like buying an iPhone because it has the best...
Exactly. You bought it for Halo, and it also had Netflix.
Calculator app. It's a nice to have, but not the reason to buy the device.
Exactly.
A better example would be the Nintendo Switch. The console doesn't even have a Disney Plus, HBO Max, or Amazon Prime app, but the sales far exceeded that of the Xbox One, as it had a great lineup of games and was much cheaper. It's as if people were buying a games console to play video games.
Yeah.
On top of that, Kinect was back.
You suck!
But by now, the hype for Kinect was well and truly dead.
Yeah.
Even worse, you couldn't buy the console
I will say, for all the mess of the Xbox One... Where is it? Where is it?
After the terrible... You couldn't buy the...
You suck!
But by now, the hype for Kinect was well and truly dead. Even...
This controller... Best controller at the time. By far the best controller at the time. Now, it has since been replaced by other things. PS5 controller is better. The Xbox One Series controller is the same controller, just better. There are good third-party controllers nowadays, like the 8-bit Do controller, but in that generation, by far best controller.
Worse, you couldn't buy the console without Kinect included, whether you liked it or not. After the terrible reveal event for the Xbox One, they tried to course correct for E3 with a greater focus on games.
Oh god, E3. God, I forgot about E3.
But this came with the reveal that the console would be always online, wouldn't play used games, and would cost $500 at launch.
Oh, right, the used games part as well. I forgot about Yeah.
Wouldn't play used games and would cost $500 at launch.
Man, I wish we could have a $500 console. Wouldn't that be nice? I'd love a $500 console. But yeah, this was so this was such a big deal at the time, and the reason why they did it is a year earlier, Diablo 3 came out. Diablo 3 was always online, and there was that was becoming like a thing that companies realized people didn't really care about. See, people were gonna buy it regardless of that, but it is a great marketing piece to argue against it. People bought Diablo 3. I believe it's the best-selling Diablo game until Diablo 4 came out. So they thought they could do the same thing. They thought they could get away... They thought they could get away with just, you know, trying it. The problem is people liked Diablo 3 at launch. Now, people argue about Diablo 3 later on, had a lot of problems, the auction house, stuff like that. But the problem that Xbox One had is they didn't talk about games. Like, why... If you were going to say, oh, here's some amazing title you're going to have day one, people wouldn't have cared. What were the Xbox One launch titles? I'm pretty sure they had nothing... They had nothing noteworthy. Okay, they did have Forza Motorsport 5. So you had one game people cared about. Rise, Son of Rome, no one gives a shit about that. Dead Rising 3, no one gives a shit about that. Killer Instinct, Dead Instinct, and then various other third-party games. Call of Duty Ghosts. Yeah, no. Actually, no, it's Motorsport, not Horizon. Sorry. No, that's the one people don't care about. Yeah, no one gives a shit about that. So they had no launch titles that anyone cared about.
And Sony were very quick to pounce on this.
This is how you share your games on PS4.
Oh, wait, you know how we're talking about dead IPs? Here's a fucking dead IP for you. Killzone. Where the fuck's Killzone, Sony?
Games on PS4.
Thanks. I'm very proud to announce that PlayStation 4 will be available at $399.
This was $100 more expensive than the PS2. PS4 was 2013. I did my high school final year project was on the PS4 launch. I did a report project on the PS4 launch and the launch titles.
Before the consoles had even launched, Sony had practically won this generation due to this price tag. The always online requirements were a sore spot for many.
Let alone the fact that during this generation, Halo also kind of went downhill.
But Don Matrick didn't care.
Fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
That was possibly the worst. Like, there is no way he, like, went through the PR team. That is not a PR answer. He said that by himself. I am almost certain that after this interview went live, he was spoken to by PR people and probably never allowed to speak without approved answers again after this. Because that is... I cannot think of a worse thing to say around the launch of a console. Oh, don't like always online? Don't buy it. Huh? Are you stupid?
In the previous generation...
Also, yes, it was Jeff Keighley again. Yes. We love Jeff Keighley. Yeah, Jeff is the harbinger of doom. Wait, I just realized. Jeff was the harbinger of doom even back at this point. Jeff interviews Xbox guy. Xbox dies. Jeff talks about High Guard. High Guard dies. Jeff has always been the harbinger of doom. Did you see that Sora will shut down? I did see that, yes. That is not going to affect RAM prices, because just because Sora shuts down does not mean the rest of the AI stuff is going to go anywhere.
People who aren't able to get some form of connectivity, it's called Xbox 360.
In the previous generation, the Xbox 360 was easy to develop for and cheaper than the PlayStation 3, while the Xbox One was harder to develop for and more expensive than the PlayStation 4. In late 2013, the Xbox One launched in third place, and it stayed there. For Xbox, it's been that way for the last 10 years.
Did the Switch... No, the Switch caught up. Sure, no, hold up. Console sales. I know they stopped at 2020, but surely the Switch sold more than the PS4. Yeah, no, okay. It sold almost as much as the PS2. I guess it didn't sell as much till COVID.
Zynga has announced that Don Mattrick has joined its ranks as Chief Executive Officer.
Less than 1 month after the abysmal E3 press conference,
He went to Zynga. He went to the mobile games company.
Its ranks as Chief Executive Officer.
Less than 1 month after the abysmal E3 press conference, Don Mattrick left Xbox to join mobile game developer Zynga, where he would last a full 2 years before resigning from that role. Don Mattrick wasn't even at Xbox to see the Xbox One's launch, as Phil Spencer would be his successor. Xbox One had a pretty decent lineup for the console's launch, but it did include one of the worst launch titles in history that just so happened to be a Kinect game. Big surprise there. While Kinect was included with every Xbox One at launch, by May of the following year, Kinect was dropped, which brought the price of the Xbox One down to $400, but this was too little, too late. Phil Spencer has said the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 era was the most costly generation to lose. As digital distribution became more popular with the Xbox One and PlayStation 4, gamers now have a library that they've slowly built up over the course of several years. So persuading consumers to jump ship from one console to another is even more difficult now than ever before. It would explain why the following Xbox console would have a cheaper version with no disk drive to reduce the barrier.
Here's a question. Do you think there is going to be let's say a super cheap subscription-based console for the next generation? Let's say they sell it for like $30, like $100, and it has a required subscription to use it. Do you think that is going to happen? Like they try again to do always online. I think there is a non-zero possibility of that being the case. Like they say it's $700 retail or $100 with a required subscription, something like that. I don't know if they would have the balls to do it, but I'd be curious to see if something like that is at least being discussed. They already have Game Pass. That's true, but you don't need Game Pass.
To entry for Xbox. This shouldn't excuse the more recent mistakes Xbox has made.
Create a Game Pass
the weaker
console?
first and
I
third
guess you could
party
do that,
lineup
yeah.
has been an issue since the Xbox One days, and the disappointing releases of Starfield and Redfall have done very little to persuade consumers to jump
Redfall's
ship.
a game.
More recently, there have been
Technically.
layoffs, weak console sales, and now studio closures. You can absolutely not blame Don Mattrick for this, but it feels like Xbox has been trying to play catch-up ever since the Xbox One's reveal. The failure of the Xbox One and Kinect had a very negative effect on the Xbox brand, especially when Xbox went from the highs of the 360 to the lows of the Xbox One.
Yep.
I've seen a few posts and comments fantasizing about how different things would be if Phil Spencer had taken over instead of Don Mattrick, if the Xbox never shifted its focus to Kinect, and the Xbox One reveal wasn't a
I think if they had focused on games, things would have been different. I know, right? Imagine a console focusing on games.
complete disaster, as even a decade later, some of the effects can be felt to this day.
Who cares about games for a console? Puh. Games? Why would you want games? There are the links. Reminds me of this short. Okay, what dost thou have here? It's a brick.
Buying a GPU just to realize they sent you a brick instead has to be one of the worst feelings in the world for a PC builder. Unless, of course, that brick GPU was the last piece for your stone PC. We already have our hands on the latest Intel Pebble Lake architecture with 16 ores and 32 sediment layers. We can install that on the motherboard board, and now we can turn to the RAM. These are the new DDR3 modules, all 32 gigabytes of them, which paves the way for these new Pine Tree-based M.2s that don't lose your data every single fall. Super convenient. And so with that all...
Is it an April Fool's video, or just want to upload a fucking random video to just upload a random video?
Assembled, we can make things a bit more concrete by installing it into our case, which means it's finally time to break out our brick GPU. Believe it or not, this is actually smaller and lighter than some 5090s. Although since this is the brick layer edition, we do have access to the built-in stone tracing, which will be really nice for our performance. But just like that, our Boulder battle station is complete. This came together nicely. And before you ask how this all gets powered, don't worry, I did install the power supply on the backside. But I am a bit worried about the CPU overheating, so let me know how we should add a CPU.
Sure. Yeah, this is Guga. So we have the Jollibee video. We have Gen Alpha aren't being kids. We have Car. Oh, we. I don't know why this is sent, but we also have this one.